After days of tit-for-tat hikes, the U.S. is now putting the brakes on escalation. On Friday, the White House said it would not increase U.S. taxes on Chinese goods above the current 145%. That's despite China hiking its tariffs on U.S. imports to 125% starting on Saturday. This full-blown U.S.-China trade war may not be getting any hotter, but it's leaving businesses out in the cold. For more on this, I'm joined now by Timor. He's a professor of economics at the Georgia Institute of Technology in the United States. Welcome to the program. So President Trump says We're glad to have you. President Trump says he's open to a deal on tariffs with China's Xi Jinping. So which one of them do you think is going to pick up the phone first?
Well, I think Trump will probably pick up the phone first. He can present it as being a great deal maker. And Xi Jinping will, I think, answer that phone call.
Which would be great news for the both economic markets and many small businesses alike. But the question is the U.S. or China more prepared to bear more pain in this economic standoff?
Well, that's a good question. China exports a lot more to the United States than the U.S. does to China. So economically, China stands to lose more. But the one sort of benefit of China, since it's not a democracy, since its policymakers don't have to respond to what people say and how they feel and how they vote, the political pain is much bigger in the United States. So both sides have something sort of in their corner. Both sides have a lot to lose.
Now, if a deal actually does take place, what exactly could it look like? How could we see the economic chessboard shaping up afterwards?
Well, it's a good question. I think there is a path to a deal, and there was in the first Trump administration there was the U.S.-China trade deal, which was labeled Part 1. This could be Part 2, and that deal would then largely have something about reducing tariffs on both sides, perhaps getting them back down to the level in the first Trump administration. I don't see them going down to zero just now, but both sides would relent on the tariffs and probably have some sort of an agreement about how much would be purchased by either side. And especially that would probably be the U.S. demand that China starts to import more of the U.S. products.
Even if a deal actually does take place, one question that keeps occurring to me is businesses hate uncertainty, and these type of trade wars increase that amount of uncertainty. So even if a deal does take place, could this have a long-term chilling effect on international trade and business deals between China and the United States moving forward?
Yes, all of these tariffs have opened up a Pandora's box of uncertainty, and there's really no way of putting that back into the box. Certainly, it's here with us to stay for some time. Even this pause of 90 days on the reciprocal tariffs is just for 90 days. Who knows what's going to happen in 90 days or even in 10 days? So uncertainty has increased, and that's going to create a lot of problems for businesses to plan for the long run.
All right, now let's move the conversation to Europe if we could. President Xi wants to team up with the European Union to resist Trump's trade policies. Could Europe now pivot more towards China as a more reliable trade partner?
That will probably happen precisely because there's more uncertainty with the United States. And if you can't plan for the long haul, then you're going to try to look for more solid partners, more trustworthy partners. And it seems like it will be both in China's and EU's favor to work with each other.
And could we also see this type of tariffs dispute also help China increase its economic clout in Southeast Asia and Africa as well? I mean, with so many random decisions coming out of the White House regarding trade policy, could we see a situation where China becomes a more stable economic influence in developing nations?
Absolutely. I mean, it was already doing that with using its Belt and Road Initiative. This randomness coming out of the White House will just push more countries into China's corner.
All right, that was Timor Besedes from the Georgia Institute of Technology. Thank you very much for your assessment.
Thank you.
Well, for more, I'm joined now by Glenn Tiffert. He's the co-chair of the program on the U.S., China, and the world at Stanford University's Hoover institutions. It's good to have you with us this evening. You know, most of the world apparently has picked up the phone, called the White House to negotiate on tariffs, but China is standing firm. It seems that President Trump is waiting for a phone call from Xi Jinping. Do you think he's going to get one?
I don't think he's going to get one. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much, Brent. I think there's a standoff now between both regimes. They're backed into a corner, and it would be very difficult for Xi Jinping to be seen to back down. His agenda very much is to portray himself as strong, as the leader of a proud Chinese nation, and as the world's #2 economy, perhaps largest by many measures. And so the question really is, where are the off-ramps for this confrontation? I think it's wrong to think of this purely in economic terms. This is a larger geostrategic play. And so the security dimension is critical here.
And how much pain is China willing to bear? Donald Trump showed that he can be pressured by the market, the media, and his advisors. Who does Xi Jinping listen to?
At the end of the day, Xi Jinping's primary constituency is the Communist Party of China. His role is to ensure it maintains its monopoly on power. Xi Jinping has never stood for a popular election, and so he does not have to fundamentally be accountable to his own people in the way that Donald Trump does. And so that is a fundamental distinction. China can bear a tremendous amount of pain, and in fact has been preparing for this moment. It's been stockpiling commodities and de-risking itself from the international system. I think this is a preview, really, if one thinks that there might be a larger geostrategic confrontation ahead, particularly over Taiwan. This is a preview of larger market disruptions that could be in store.
You know, there has been a lot of talk about which side is better positioned for a trade war economically, but which leader would you say is in the better political position tonight?
I think it depends upon who the constituency is. I think for the moment, Donald Trump's policies are playing relatively well in the broader American public because they have yet to experience the economic pain that might come from these changes. This may change 6 months from now or 2 years from now when there are midterm elections in the United States. So I think both right now are riding high, playing to their bases, which I think are nationalist bases within each respective country.
Is there a danger that a full-blown, no-holds-bar trade war between the United States and China could be seen by Trump or Xi as an act of war, hot war in itself?
I think unlikely. I think this is forcing a question that many had considered a possible path that we might follow. And that is, if you are trying to hedge against the risk of conflict in Asia over Taiwan, then a decoupling or de-risking of the two economies is probably the safer bet in a gradual way, perhaps not a forced overnight way, but a gradual way. And I think these tariffs are a way to possibly get out in front of that problem. Now, the goal here really is to avoid conflict. And I think neither side wants a hot war. But the danger is, of course, that we stumble into one. And so we have to be alert to that risk.
President Xi wants to team up with the European Union to resist Trump's trade policies. That's the message we've been getting. Could Europe now pivot towards China?
I think that would be a tremendous mistake for Europe, if not suicidal. There is nothing that China and Russia would like more than to divide the United States and Europe for one another. It makes Russia's hand in Europe stronger, and it makes China's hand in Asia stronger. We must resist that temptation. I understand there are hurt feelings and emotions are running very high on both sides of the Atlantic, but the relationships and fundamentals have been strong, and we are stronger together than we are apart. As a wise man once said, we must hang together or we shall hang separately.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Final question before we run out of time. Besides tariffs, does China have any other strategic tools in its arsenal that it can use against Washington in this trade war?
China actually has the weaker hand in the trade war in that it sells much less to the United States. It buys much less from the United States than it sells. And so really all it could do is cause temporary pain and raise costs in the United States. But for example, processing of rare earth minerals could easily be moved out of China to other territories like Australia, Canada, and the United States at higher costs. So we could bear these costs. We would just be poorer for it.
Mr. Tiffert, it's been good talking with you. We appreciate your time and your valuable insights on this Friday night. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Well, for more, I'm joined now by Bruce Stokes. He's with the German Marshall Fund. His specialty is economics and transatlantic relations. Bruce, it's good to have you on the show again. So we've got this tit-for-tat tariff hiking that we're seeing now between the U.S. and China. Can I pose the question, which side is going to suffer the most? Can we talk about that now?
Well, I actually think that in the short run, probably the Chinese will suffer the most, in the sense that their workers will want to continue to produce, want to continue to earn. And obviously, the U.S. market for many of their products will be cut off at 145% tariffs. But the Chinese will find other markets. They will ship things to Europe. They will ship things to Southeast Asia, undermining those markets, actually. The American consumer, I think, is going to take several months, maybe many months, to feel the real impact of this. But do not deceive ourselves. Inflation is coming. And the thing that American consumers will also experience, I think, is a rise in prices for things that are not imported, because businesses will take advantage of the general price rise to raise their own prices.
Well, let me stick with China for a moment. Why do you think China is standing up to Donald Trump? The rest of the world apparently picked up the phone, called the White House and said, all right, we're ready to talk. Why isn't Beijing doing that?
Well, I think, for one thing, the Chinese feel themselves to be, in many ways, an equal of the United States, or at least they aspire to be an equal of the United States. And there's a long history in China of foreigners suppressing the Chinese economy, or going after China in many colonial ways, imperialist ways. So the party, I think, very much needs to stand up to the United States to demonstrate that we are different from our past. The one thing I think we should remember is that the People's Daily had a headline just this week, a quote from Xi, that after the announcement of the American tariffs, the sky is still standing. This was a line that Mao used after the failure of the Great Leap Forward. So it does suggest that Xi is taking a playbook from his idol, Mao Zedong, and saying, we can survive this.
The United States and the European Union, they share a common challenge in a rising China. Are Trump's tariffs, are they a distraction from that, or worse, are they actually bringing China and the European Union closer together? You may have seen Spain's prime minister is currently in Beijing for talks on trade and investment.
Right. The Spanish are among one of the European nations that would like to see more Chinese investment, especially in electric vehicles, possibly. I think that my concern is that there still are opportunities for the U.S. and Europe to work together to combat Chinese subsidies, particularly in electric vehicles, and the forthcoming challenge to Airbus and Boeing by Chinese commercial airlines that have been highly subsidized. We have to ignore the fact that we have tensions across the Atlantic and realize we have a common challenge posed by China, and we need to at least not be distracted from that during the current trade war.
Bruce Stokes with the German Marshall Fund. Bruce, we appreciate your time and your insights tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.